Andiamo, forza! No, vado di vista!
Dovevano darti a disparo!
Si è volatilizzato. Me ne vado.
Ecce qui togli peccata mu.
عارف راح كل اللي جبان محمد
ليس مهما كما ظننت ساسا.
صدقني المقابل بالوقت.
Ladies and gents, welcome to AusGamers. You are here with Stephen Farrelly, managing editor of the site. That ominous intro that you just saw is the beginning of Far Cry Primal from Ubisoft, the next entry in the Far Cry series, which isn't to be construed as some sort of spin-off a la Far Cry Blood Dragon. This is very much its own game, with plenty to explore and plenty to do. The game is set quite a long time ago in the past, in the Stone Age, and it's quite a de-evolution from what we know, but in a good way. And we'll get to what that actually means once we get to some of the gameplay. What we're actually looking at here is this stylized intro that really gives and paints, no pun intended, a picture of what Ubisoft has actually done here. There's a lot of heart and soul that has gone into this project, and they've done a lot of research. The game is highly stylized as a result, and what you get from all of this is this sense of wonderment that the other games have never really been able to capture. Now, I'm going to jump forward a little bit because I don't really want to spoil too much of the game's setting, but we are going to have a quick look at how the game opens proper. Now, you play the role of Takar in the fictional land of Oros. For whatever reason, your people get scattered around the place, not too far from where we are right now, and it will be your job to bring them all back together, and there will be a bunch of gameplay built around that concept. What nobody knows at this point is that Takar actually has a unique ability which allows him to speak to animals. In the case of where we are right now, however, that's actually not going to rear its head. What I wanted to show you here is just, first of all, how gorgeous the game is. This engine is quite old, and they're still pulling like wonders with it. This is captured and running on PS4 at a recent event out at Ubisoft, all by myself, so this is pretty much me playing. Anyway, we're going to jump into some actual gameplay and talk a little bit more. Now, familiarity will strike early. You are dumped into a relatively large open world area that will act as a tutorial. And what's the first thing that we see? A glowing object in the environment. Now you can go over and harvest this, which obviously means that the game is going to be about crafting, which shouldn't come as any surprise given that you are a person of nature who lives off the land in the Stone Age. So, you know, it actually probably makes more sense here than it ever has in the series before. Now, it is, a lot of the game is actually really about that concept of living off the land. And there's sort of an unfortunate throwback to the series because we've done this before, because here it feels like it actually belongs and it's something that we really should be doing. But it will make people sort of say, well, they haven't really changed up too much. But, you know, you need to brace yourself with this concept that, well, actually you do, because, you know, you're Tekar, you're like an ancient Stone Age man. So anyway, I'm not going to get too bogged down in it. There is a lot of stuff around in the environment. It can get a little bit overwhelming quite early, but the game does very slowly introduce you to the things that you need. And obviously, no Stone Age hunter would be anything without his trusty bow. And that's where some of the differences really start to shine. Yes, you are doing a lot of the same things. The environment does point out things to you, similarly to how they've done it in Far Cry in the past, but now you're trading up, you know, ammunition for arrows and grenades for, like, flames. So there is quite a bit of difference, and that's when that de-evolution that I sort of mentioned in the intro really comes into play. And when I said it's a good thing, it actually really is, because you learn to play a little bit more on your toes. You'll have your spear, you'll have your arrow, you will get more weapons down the track, but you do need to hunt and you do need to be wary. And the thing with this land is, you can't really hear it probably at the moment, but there are creature sounds all the time. Obviously in the other games you could hear gunshots and you could hear, you know, the enemy chatter and stuff like that, but this is a brave new world, and we as modern humans have never really been here before. So Ubisoft has done a really great job of making us feel trapped and alone in a place that we don't really understand. I mean, for me, the only thing that I really took was that I've watched enough Bear Grylls and have gone camping a few times to know that this stuff is what you kind of have to do. But anyway, let's move on. Speaking of living off the land and being that type of character, one of the things that you will definitely be doing a lot of is tracking. And you can see here the red glowing kind of, I guess, tracking vision. That's going to come into play quite a bit. And obviously you could do sort of similar things in the other Far Cry games, but here it does sort of, again, contextually it makes a lot more sense. And it can actually lead you to some pretty cool stuff. It's also, you know, can lead you to quite a bit of danger, which I'm sort of about to point out to you right now. Now, the game, like every other Far Cry game, is also very brutal. In fact, it's probably the most brutal Far Cry game that I've come across. And we haven't even finished the game yet. Basically, all we really got was a couple of hours with it in our play session. I just wanted to point out one of the main enemies who will become your ally down the track, but there's sort of another purpose here. And yes, there he is, the big old saber-toothed tiger. Now, again, I'm sort of pointing this out because it's familiar territory. I mean, these cinematics are very similar to what we get, but they blend so seamlessly with this open world concept. And the other part of all of this that I really wanted to point out is just how important fire really is. I mean, this is the Stone Age, and it was an element that they harnessed, not an invention, an element that they harnessed, and it will become so important and integral to the future of yourself and your tribe. And in case you were actually wondering, yes, you can actually kill things with fire, obviously, but like this little mouse. And yes, after he's dead, he's harvestable. But my pack was full. I don't know what kind of meat it is. You'll also be creating or claiming, as it were, bonfires. These are pretty similar to the radio towers in the other games. And effectively, once you claim one of those, and you obviously claim that encampment there, and it sort of creates a bit of a safe haven. Now the game really is stunning. The vistas are gorgeous, and they've just done such a great job of capturing this kind of wildlife area. And as you can see, all that there is explorable space. You know, so, and you will go to different areas. So right now, early on in the game, I'm just kind of running around in the jungle, and you know, you get sort of an idea of the sort of the land that this is, which is again is, you know, familiar but unfamiliar. Movement is very much the same as it always has been in the game, and while ultimately you're going to be spending a lot of time on foot, so you know you can't really get into choppers or anything like that. It's not that big a deal because the game is so lush and there's so much to do and see that it's not really a problem. Now, I wanted to jump straight into an engagement. There are enemies, basically different tribes that you know, don't get along with your tribe, and it can get quite brutal. The game is more of a melee brawler in my mind than anything else. Once you get control of your animals, which we'll sort of talk about very shortly, you can effectively play the game in a different style, and I'll show you here. Like you can play the game stealth. So once again, it's very similar to previous Far Cry games, and if you're as good a shot as I am, then you know stealth is always the way to go. But ultimately, what the animals really bring to the fore is the ability to kind of not only distract, but to maul and to maim and to break up packs. Now, before you actually get your ability, you need to meet this guy, Tensei. He's the game's crazy shaman-esque character, and he sends you on a bit of a spirit quest, where the very first animal you actually get is this owl here. Now obviously, as you can see, it's an ethereal kind of sequence, and that's completely fitting with the Far Cry franchise, and again, contextually it just has a lot of bearing and place in Far Cry Primal. Now, your owl will actually replace your ability to use binoculars or your camera from previous games, where you can fly above and tag enemies so you know exactly what you're looking for. Also, in order to actually get your animals, all you really need to do is turn your ability on, and then, you know, like Caesar, the dog whisperer, you all of a sudden have a hyena as a really great friend. And these little guys, or any animal really, goes into a kind of a sub-menu for you to select from. Now we're going to close the game out here. I'm just going to show you a little bit more of the UI and just how deep the game really is. So obviously we talked a little bit about crafting earlier. We've talked a bit about the animals. Similar to the other games, you've got a skill tree, and different areas and characters can be upgraded in this way. And the reason for that is there's also village upgrades that you can do, and on top of everything else, there's I guess a meta game to making sure that your tribe is well and truly looked after. So it's not so much a game about exploring or being like a fish out of water. You are not a fish out of water at all. Well, we as players are, but Takar is someone who is totally roped to the land, and to save his villagers, he needs to do as much as he possibly can, and to also ensure that his village not only survives but thrives. And that's the big differential in this Far Cry over the other Far Cry games. We've certainly seen touches of those types of things, but you're always sort of a lone wolf, no pun intended, given the nature of this game. But the idea that Takar is, this kind of savior and a person that will rally all of the downtrodden tribesmen from his ilk to go against. And believe me, there are some pretty crazy bad guys in Far Cry Primal, which I don't want to spoil for you yet. But yeah, so the journey is fantastic so far. It's gorgeous, it plays really well, it plays familiarly, but it also has enough differential and enough context to some of that familiarity for it to really kind of resonate. Can't wait to actually get my hands on the final copy.